is only a transition to a different sphere of consciousness. Carol Ann is not like those she's with. She is a living presence in their spiritual earthbound plane.
Hello and welcome to episode 56 of the Talking to the Dead podcast. This week I want to do a 2-episode series, so I'm going to record today something I just want to read to you, and then I'm going to record between now and Friday a follow-on episode discussing the implications of what I'm going to read to you on life as we know it at the moment. Now, just because I don't want you guys to think that I've gone off the rails and become a religious fanatic, I just wanted to give you a little bit of background as to why I'm going to read to you what I'm about to read to you. As you will remember if you listened to last week's episode, I was responding to some questions that I received from my American friend Linda about the possibility of what could be going on in America, and this sense that led us to this conclusion almost, and it's not just my conclusion, that somehow Donald Trump is being portrayed by the religious right, as it's called there, as some form of God, and maybe he is a second coming in his own right. But equally, there are those people who would portray him almost as the Antichrist and the great deceiver. This has really got me thinking in the last week. And in the last few nights, I was really getting very, very strong feelings that I needed to talk more about this. And I ended up, as usual, getting involved in a lot of strange things going on. Quite a lot of interest in the occult suddenly, and reading about pop groups that were influenced by the occult, or understanding about the latest issues with the rapper P. Diddy, who's being accused of all sorts of heinous things, but a lot of people are also saying it's got something to do with the occult and abuse. There is a lot of talk in the English media, and has been for years, about satanic sexual child abuse. And if you read about what's going on in Israel at the moment, you can't help but make parallels between the long-standing struggles of the Jewish nation and the never-ending, it seems, battles between them and other races and other religions. Also the Muslims, and they're fighting against Jews and Christians. It's all happening. And I'm just very interested in why. And to what extent, as I mentioned last week, is all the stuff that's written in the Bible and all the stuff that's written in the holy books, is it somehow true in the respect that it was the people at the time, or not necessarily at the time, maybe slightly afterwards, when writing things, interpreting stuff that they'd received through interdimensional entities? Is it true that maybe there is something about angels and demons that relates not so much to, the mythical big bad Satan and the wonderful angels, but more towards the forces of good and bad, or good and evil, and the evil and the goodness in the world that has been manifested and has become almost real, or is real, because of all the thought form power that's been put into it by people for thousands of years. So all of this is very, very interesting to me, and I've got a lot that I want to talk about probably tomorrow, about how this, I believe, is influencing the world at the moment, and how it's got to do with interdimensional beings. But first of all, I want to read you something that just came to me, and I really think it's important to read this, because it's what started this whole thing. This, if you like, the whole discussion about the occult. Everything that we know about Christianity is also based on this. And it's from the book of Revelation, and it's chapter 13, and it's in the version that I'm reading, it's called "The Beast Out of the Sea," and the talk of what goes on in Armageddon, the talk of what's happening in the book of Revelation, is something that really, in a way, I think was at the start of all secret societies and all occult and all people who talk about the New Age, everything to do with what was going on in the 70s, and particularly now with the Church of Satan and with people who are using occult initiation rites as we speak, in the belief that by doing so, they can somehow affect their own fortunes for good, or to, I presume, affect other people's fortunes for the bad. So I will talk much more about that tomorrow and try to get to the truth of the matter in regards to this, from what I've learned from talking to my guardian angel and all the things that have happened in the last year. I'll try to get to that in the next few days. But for today's episode, I just want to finish, and it's a short episode today, by reading Revelation chapter 13. And I strongly recommend that you dig out your Bible, or if you're a religious person, just take it off your nightstand and follow along with me, because this is the daddy of them all. And this, if it is true, is what has been passed to the writer by some entity. And whether it's Christian, whether it's Muslim, it doesn't really matter. It's what is being said, which is what we need to try to interpret and see it was a message that was given to us. So here is the message. It's called "The Beast Out of the Sea," chapter 13. The dragon stood on the shore of the sea, and I saw a beast coming out of the sea. It had 10 horns and 7 heads, with 10 crowns on its horns, and on each head a blasphemous name. The beast I saw resembled a leopard, but had feet like those of a bear, and a mouth like that of a lion. The dragon gave the beast his power, and his throne and great authority. One of the heads of the beast seemed to have had a fatal wound, but the fatal wound had been healed. The whole world was filled with wonder and followed the beast. People worshipped the dragon because he had given authority to the beast, and they also worshipped the beast and asked, "Who is like the beast? Who can wage war against it?" The beast was given a mouth to utter proud words and blasphemies, and to exercise its authority for 42 months. It opened its mouth to blaspheme God and to slander his name and his dwelling place and those who live in heaven. It was given power to wage war against God's holy people and to conquer them. And it was given authority over every tribe, people, language, and nation. All inhabitants of the earth will worship the beast. All whose names have not been written in the Lamb's book of life, the Lamb who was slain from the creation of the world. Whoever has ears, let them hear. If anyone is to go into captivity they will go. If anyone is to be killed with the sword they will be killed. This calls for patient endurance and faithfulness on the part of God's people. Then I saw a second beast coming out of the earth. It had 2 horns, like a lamb, but it spoke like a dragon. It exercised all the authority of the first beast on its behalf, and made the earth and its inhabitants worship the first beast, whose fatal wound had been healed. And it performed great signs, even causing fire to come down from heaven to earth in full view of the people. Because of the signs, it was given power to perform in behalf of the first beast. It deceived the inhabitants of the earth. It ordered them to set up an image in honor of the beast, who was wounded by the sword and yet lived. The second beast was given power to give breath to the image of the first beast, so that the image could speak and cause all who refused to worship the image to be killed. It also forced all people, great and small, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive a mark on their right hands or on their foreheads, so that they could not buy or sell unless they had the mark, which is the name of the beast or the number of its name. This calls for wisdom. Let the person who has insight calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man. That number is 666. So there you are. Now, I'd love you to read that and read that a few more times. And I want to then tomorrow quickly give you my rundown as to what I think that might mean right now, and then go into some history that I think has been as a result of this particular chapter in Revelation, and bring it all up to date as to why I think it's probably becoming very relevant, and I think probably why millions and millions of people around the world believe somehow that the earth is moving towards this end time that was predicted. And could it be that we are witnessing that right now? Now, obviously, as you know from listening to me before, I am not a religious person, but I do believe that religions are there for a reason, and that the truth that they hold is a universal truth that has been given to us, mainly because of our interdimensional nature. And I want to obviously try to explain everything in terms of that. So I'm not going to give a religious doctrine based on the Bible. I think you probably know me well enough by now to understand that that wouldn't be of much point. So thank you again for listening, and speak to you soon. Hello again, and I am back now. I just quickly want to give you my interpretation, which is, if you like, almost a psychic interpretation of the book of Revelation chapter 13. I don't want it to be necessarily my feelings, but also the things that came to me when I read about it and when I read it. The first thing that strikes me is the dragon imagery. The dragon stood on the shore of the sea. I've been very interested in reading about 70s counterculture in the last few days. Probably it came about because I've always been very interested in the effect of Aleister Crowley, who I'll talk more about later, and his influence on pop music and the counterculture of the 1970s. But also the dragon was very much used by one of the great musicians, Jimmy Page of Led Zeppelin, who used to have a costume that was made up of a dragon, and it had his own sigil on it, which I think was Zozo. And I immediately thought of that. And I think it's quite interesting because the use of the dragon here and the use of the dragon in costumes, and also talking about Aleister Crowley, talking about Thelema, talking about the occult, I think this has some relevance to this piece here. I saw the beast coming out of the sea. I think this particular beast that's being described sounds incredibly interesting. Now, people might say that it could be Donald Trump, especially when you talk about having a fatal wound, but it was a fatal wound that had been healed, and the whole world was filled with wonder and followed the beast. Well, Donald has made a huge thing of the fact that he was almost mortally wounded in that assassination attempt, and he was somehow spared, that he was almost saved by God. And I think if you are a great believer in that, and I think from what I understand, 37% of the fundamentalist Christians in the United States are believers of that, literally, they feel that Donald Trump is somehow a God saved person. Now, if you don't believe in Donald Trump, then you probably would think that he must be the beast. He must be the opposite of that. He must almost be the Antichrist. Donald Trump seems to be that sort of polarizing person. You're either for him or you're against him. But what's being said in this chapter is that somebody else is helping give him the power. And I immediately thought of Elon Musk, who does seem to have huge amounts of power and wealth, and does seem to be helping the beast, if you like. The question was here, if this person becomes so powerful, nobody can wage war against it. And it does seem that Donald Trump is, at the moment, only a few weeks into his presidency, doing everything he possibly can to show the whole world that he is in charge. And Musk is trying to show everybody that, the two of them together are almost indestructible financial and state power. It mentions that the beast had great amounts of blasphemies and would utter proud words. I mean, I've heard that so many times about Donald Trump, that he's proud and he's arrogant and he's narcissistic, and he basically is insulting to everyone. Very interesting. And he's going to exercise his authority for 42 months, which I think is about the time that a president has to be in power, isn't it? And you could see that he was also getting involved in waging a war against God's holy people and to conquer them. Now, I don't know. It depends on your side of the fence. So if you're Muslim, you're going to be feeling very, very downtrodden at the moment, because by all accounts, Donald Trump is completely falling in line with Netanyahu, who is claiming that he is representing the Jewish people. I could argue perhaps, and we could all argue perhaps, that Zionism is slightly different from just being Jewish. But anyway, it would seem that Donald Trump is giving Netanyahu the huge amounts of power and weapons and money that are needed for him to conquer the Muslim nation, which is the Palestinian people at the moment, is being represented by them. So you could argue that. This comes to my mind. There is this section there that all inhabitants of the earth are going to have to worship the beast. It's very interesting how Donald Trump is moving away from what he promised of making America great to talk about the whole world. I mean, he's talking about, Canada. He wants to take Canada. He wants to take Norway. He wants to influence South America. He's renaming the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America. He wants to basically buy up Gaza and turn it into a real estate empire of his own making. He's influencing with Musk world governments and the Germans are upset about it. The English are upset about it. So you could argue that, there is a huge amount of world attention on what's going on in America. And I think probably lastly of all is this bit about the signs that we should recognize him. I suppose, the signs are there if you want to look at them. The idea that you will be killed if you refuse to worship him, well, let's hope not. But the power does seem to be consolidating. And also having to receive a mark on their right hands or on their foreheads so that they cannot buy or sell unless they have the mark. What immediately came to my mind was digital currencies and the use of Bitcoin. It is definitely possible that people will have some sort of implant either in their forehead or in their right hands that's going to enable them to trade using Bitcoin. But even more interesting, of course, is that Donald Trump launched his own form of digital currency, the Trump coin. And I think Melania did the same. Now that seems to be straight out of this prophecy, that eventually perhaps nobody's going to be able to buy or sell, and he's going to control the financial markets with his own form of mark. Now this calls for wisdom. Let the person who has insight calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and the number is 666. I really don't know how that can be compared to what's going on with Donald Trump, but maybe somebody else can. I will stop there. Tomorrow I will upload another episode where I examine what effect that this chapter has had in my living memory, because I can't really talk for anything before. I can talk a little bit about Aleister Crowley, of course, and I'll tell you all about him and the effect that he had on the 70s when I grew up in the counterculture, and the effect that's had on the world ever since. And right now I will bring it up to 2025 and show you how the effects of the occult, which, as you know from what I've said before, I don't actually believe in the occult other than the effect that it can have on people psychologically, from what I've been told. There is no sense of the devil, there is no sense of a god, there is no sense of, people being able to curse people, or there's no sense of worshipping devils. All of that is just man-made nonsense. But what is important is the effect it has on people. And if people do believe it, and if enough people follow it, then it creates a thought form power, an entity that is strong enough to be as good as real. So yes, in that respect, I do believe in evil, and I do believe in the power of the occult, but not for the reasons that the proponents, describe it. But I want to talk a bit about that, and it's quite interesting that in 2025 we're talking about the famous rapper P. Diddy, who is currently in prison awaiting trial on charges, many charges, not least potentially abuse of children and people. And he seems to be connected in an occult way, they're saying, with many in Hollywood. So as if, rather like in the 1970s, there was a lot of talk about music and about the use of the occult, and particularly Crowley and Thelema, and eventually Scientology, to influence people in order to get them to become very, very successful, or quite opposite, actually influence people to ruin them. And also you look at Freemasonry, which I can discuss also in terms of how that is a very prevalent secret society right now, and has very similar goals and very similar scriptures, if you like, to Scientology, as well as Thelema. And really all the way up till now, where you can see people using the occult, thinking that it is going to affect them positively in a way, that they're going to have control over things in this world. And again, Scientology most definitely teaches its senior adherents that. Freemasonry does the same, and so does Thelema and other occult societies. So how is that of relevance right now? Well, I'll talk about that more tomorrow. Thanks.